The income tax is a 20th century socialist experiment that has failed. Before the income tax was imposed on us on just 80 years ago, government had no claim to our income. Only sales excise and tariff taxes were allowed. Allen Keyes.
From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where defeating Canada isn't just a fun leisure activity, it's a way of life. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all Zambonis at sea. Welcome to the Blast Radius. Delighted to have you with us tonight. And yes, full disclosure, I didn't watch any of the Olympics this year. In fact, I haven't watched the Olympics in a good number of years, since the Olympics, like nearly all sporting competitions, have been utterly ruined by the imposition of dumb political activist bullshit. But having said that, when the gold medal game in hockey is the USA versus Canada, I will make a one-time exception for that. And I'm glad I did, because today, on the 46th anniversary of the Lake Placid Miracle on Ice, the Americans defeated Kazakhstan 2-1 in overtime for our third ever gold medal in hockey. I guess we have to say men's hockey now, but whatever. Why do they have to play 3-on-3 overtime in the gold medal game? I can't say, but it sucks. And it's stupid. How did it happen that the host nation built a hockey rink that doesn't resemble the dimensions of a regulation hockey rink anywhere in the world, and without anybody noticing until it was far too late? Again, I can't say, but it sucks. And it's stupid. But setting those complaints aside, it's a pretty fantastic game. And though I no longer give two squirts of piss about the Olympics, I am glad we won. Now, in the United States, for the average American, this is going to be a thing that provides maybe a couple days of enjoyment and good feelings and is then quickly forgotten about. But in Canada, this is going to be recorded as one of the blackest days in their history. Not their sporting history, mind you, but their national history. Does that make this victory even more gratifying? Yes. Yes, it does. But we're not here to talk about hockey tonight. We're actually here to talk about something much sexier and more exciting: tariffs. Now, as you have most assuredly already heard by now, 2 days ago, the Supreme Court handed down a 6-3 decision in which the majority held that President Donald Trump exceeded his authority under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977, a law that was passed by Democrat majorities in both houses of Congress and then signed into law by a Democrat president. in which Congress invested the chief executive with the authority to, at his own discretion, identify and declare economic emergencies related to international commerce and to take whatever remedial measures he deems appropriate, including the imposition of tariffs and other associated duties. But since Trump is the president now, the Washington establishment doesn't necessarily believe the things it believed 49 years ago. And if there's anything we know about the Washington establishment, it is that Chief Justice John Roberts is one of its very favorite sons. And if there's anything we know about John Roberts, it's that he hates Donald Trump with the white-hot, burning intensity of 1,000 suns. Roberts has been looking for an opportunity to get into a dick-measuring contest with Trump and thus assert the continuing supremacy of the Washington establishment by kneecapping some major aspect of his second-term agenda, and I guess he thinks that he has found it here. The legal rationale isn't much to write home about, really. The majority opinion, authored by Roberts himself, makes the rather fanciful argument that Trump needed to go back to Congress and ask them to confirm on a case-by-case basis the authority that the 1977 Congress already exclusively invested in the president. Will this decision make a whole lot of difference as a practical matter? Not really. Because, as Justice Brett Kavanaugh correctly noted in his dissenting opinion, there are 3 or 4 other statutory avenues whereby Trump can continue levying the exact same tariffs he has already been levying. And if the Supreme Court wants to neuter all of those, that will take many years to accomplish. And let's go ahead and ask the question that functions as the rhetorical elephant in the room. If Congress doesn't like the way the president is executing one of its statutes, shouldn't they handle it by repealing or rewriting or revising the piece of legislation in question? In a sane world, yes. But alas, we don't live in a sane world. And so here we are. As we know all too well, since this is a thing that involves Donald Trump, the current conversation around tariffs tends to take the form of a zero-sum game. If you're a fan of Trump, then tariffs are great and awesome and wonderful. But if you're a member of Team Orange Man Bad, if your idea of sartorial tastefulness is wearing a pussy hat with a keffiyeh, then tariffs are evil and autocratic and completely intolerable. This has the predictable result of turning a conversation about a subject of great nuance and complexity and its historical scope into your typical online flame war where 2 opposing camps of low information morons just scream abusive epithets at one another. But here on this program, we don't play that game. Here on this program, we believe the 30,000-foot historical view is the view that matters most. Why? Because all events in the present day are a culmination of a long series of previous events that transpired in years and decades and centuries past. And current-day arguments that fail to take historical perspective into account are ultimately exercises in stupidity and ignorance. So tonight, in the enduring, undying interest of correcting category errors and promoting the public mental hygiene, we present for your kind consideration Curmudgeon's Field Guide to Tariffs. Prologue, the price tag with a flag on it. If you think a tariff is something China pays us for misbehaving, then we need to have a talk. A calm talk, a friendly talk, a talk involving a bit of arithmetic, because somewhere along the way, we as a people developed the charming belief that when Congress places a tariff on imported goods, foreign governments gather in smoky rooms, pass a hat around, and mail us a check with a little note attached to it that says, "Oh, we're sorry about everything." But that is not actually how any of this works. A tariff is not a fine levied against a misbehaving nation. It is not a diplomatic parking ticket. It is not a patriotic surcharge paid by foreigners as some sort of penance. It is, strictly speaking, a tax. Specifically, it is a tax imposed by the United States government on goods entering the United States. If you're wondering who writes the check, the answer is the importer does. The American company that brings the goods through the port. The man standing at the dock, not the man standing in Beijing. The law determines who writes the check, but the market determines who feels the bruise. Now, before anyone starts polishing their pitchforks or fainting into a chaise lounge, let me be clear. Tariffs are not inherently wicked. They are not inherently virtuous. They are tools, blunt tools, tools that can raise revenue, tools that can protect domestic industries, tools that can distort markets, tools that can change behavior. But tools nonetheless. And like most other types of tools, they can be prudentially and responsibly used, or they can be used recklessly and destructively, depending on whose hands happen to be holding them at any given moment. And before we argue about whether to swing the hammer, we might want to first start by understanding what a hammer is. Because for roughly about 60% of our national history, tariffs were not some exotic economic side dish. They were the entree. They were how the federal government kept its lights on. For most of American history, the federal government was essentially a customs house with its own navy. There was no income tax, there was no IRS, there was no annual ritual of self loathing in April each year. There were just ships, ledgers, and dockside receipts. If that surprises you, good. That means we are already learning something. Chapter 1: What a tariff actually is. First, let us define the thing before we weaponize it. I know that's an unfashionable thing to do in a world where nearly all discourse takes the form of an internet flame war, but bear with the host nonetheless. A tariff is a tax imposed on imported goods, not on exporters, not on foreign governments, but on imports. When a shipment of steel or automobiles or washing machines or novelty lawn flamingos arrives at an American port, the importing company pays a tax calculated as a percentage of the value of those goods. That tax becomes part of the cost structure. Now, here is where people start tripping over themselves, typically. Some will say, well, sure, technically the importer pays it, but the foreign producer always absorbs the cost. Well, not always, but sometimes. Others will say, no, the consumer always pays it. Not always, but sometimes. Still others will say, domestic producers always benefit. Again, not always, but sometimes. In other words, welcome to Economic Policy 101, where things are never as simple as your perpetually doom-scrolling brain and your entomological attention span would prefer them to be. Who ultimately bears the cost of a tariff depends on supply chains, on competition, on price sensitivity, and on the relative bargaining power of buyers and sellers. It depends on how easily consumers can switch to alternatives. It depends also on just how desperate foreign producers are to maintain their market access. But one thing it does not depend on is patriotic chanting. The tariff is collected at the border by our government from our importer. That is the starting point. Everything else is market dynamics. And once we understand that, we can start asking better questions. Not does China pay, but what happens next? Chapter 2, Before the IRS, How We Ran the Country on Dock Fees. Now let's rewind the tape for a moment and take a nice long drink of historical circumspection. From 1789 until the early 20th century, tariffs were the primary source of federal revenue, not a side hustle, but the main event. The Constitution itself gave the Congress the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises. And in the early republic, duties, meaning tariffs, did most of the heavy lifting. Why was that? Because the federal government was small, really quite small, in fact. There was no sprawling administrative state. There was no Social Security. There was no Medicare. There was no assistant deputy undersecretary in the Department of Alphabet Soup. The federal government built a navy, maintained a few post roads, serviced war debts, and kept the republic stitched together rather loosely. And that was about it. If your government fits inside a shoebox, then dock fees will cover the rent nicely. And this is where things start to get interesting, because tariffs were not merely fiscal instruments, they were political explosives. In 1832, South Carolina decided it didn't much care for a federal tariff law that it considered unfair, so the state legislature passed what was called the Ordinance of Nullification, in which it declared that the tariff was going to be void within its borders. And now you've got a problem, because if a state can simply opt out of federal law, you no longer have a federal government. You have something closer to a suggestion box. Yes, the first shot of the Civil War was fired in South Carolina, but it was not fired at Fort Sumter in 1861. It was fired nearly a full 3 decades earlier when the state declared that it could unilaterally nullify a federal tariff. Before the cannons, before the uniforms, the fight began with a customs schedule. President Andrew Jackson did not find this very charming, but then that was the same reaction he had to most things. He threatened force. Congress duly passed what became known as the Force Bill. You may recall this story from the Insurrection Act episode of 3 weeks ago, because said act was very nearly invoked in this case, but ultimately The crisis was de-escalated, as sometimes tends to happen when you point bayonets at people and ask them how much they really, really want to go to federal prison. But the principle was nonetheless established, and there was a principle that said tariffs are not just economic policy, they are constitutional stress tests. They forced the country to confront a question that would not stay buried. Is the Union supreme, or is it optional? That is not a minor footnote. That is a tectonic signature on the civilizational Richter scale. Chapter 3, Protection versus Revenue, Pick a Lane. In the early republic, tariffs were primarily about revenue. Ships come in, goods get taxed, the government gets funded. It's clean, it's simple, it's a nice little balance sheet on a ledger, but as the 19th century progressed, something else crept in. Protection. A revenue tariff is designed to raise money. A protective tariff, on the other hand, is designed to raise prices on foreign goods high enough that domestic producers can compete more easily or indeed dominate outright. And here's the part that almost nobody says out loud. The higher you raise a tariff for protective purposes, the less revenue it may generate. Because if you tax imports heavily enough to discourage them, fewer imports arrive. Fewer imports means fewer taxable transactions, which means lower revenue. You can fund a government with tariffs, or you can wall off foreign competition with tariffs, but doing both at maximum intensity is a mathematically awkward proposition. This tension ran through the 19th century like a live wire. Industrial states in the North often favored higher protective tariffs. Agricultural exporting states in the South, which depended on exporting raw materials to foreign markets and on importing finished goods, often despised them. Tariffs weren't just fiscal policy, they were sectional policy. And once again, we find ourselves back at the edge of constitutional argument and political fracture. Because when you use tariffs to rearrange the industrial geography of a nation, you are not just collecting money, you are picking winners. Chapter 4, the 16th Amendment changes the plumbing. And now, inevitably, we arrive at 1913. The 16th Amendment is ratified. Congress is granted clear constitutional authority to levy a federal income tax. Parenthetically, if you ever find yourself getting the impression that many of the worst choices we have ever made as a society happened during the Woodrow Wilson administration, that is not any sort of an accident. And overnight, well, not strictly overnight, but close enough to overnight for our present narrative purposes, the plumbing changes. The federal government is no longer primarily funded by what crosses the docks. It is funded by what crosses your paycheck. And this changes everything. When tariffs were the main revenue source, there was a natural ceiling. You could only tax as much as the ships brought in. You were necessarily constrained by trade volume. But once income taxation becomes central, then constraints shift, and they shift rather wildly. Revenue becomes tied to domestic productivity and earnings, not just to imported goods. This allows the federal government to expand dramatically, exponentially in scope over the course of the 20th century. Foreign wars, social programs, regulatory regimes, all of it required a revenue stream far larger than dock fees could ever hope to sustain. And this is where modern nostalgia sometimes wanders into fantasy. Yes, but we used to run the country without an income tax. Obviously, this is a true statement. We also used to run the country without interstate highways, aircraft carriers the size of small cities, Medicare, or a standing administrative state larger than the national population was on the day the Constitution was ratified. You can fund a minimalist republic on tariffs. You cannot fund a $4 trillion federal apparatus on cargo ships without consequences. Scale matters. And arithmetic remains undefeated. Chapter 5, National Security is not a coupon code. Now let's fast forward to the modern era. Tariffs reemerge not primarily as revenue engines, but as strategic tools. Congress has, over time, delegated significant authority to the executive branch to impose tariffs under certain conditions, including national security. And this is where rhetoric becomes elastic. Because who's doing the interpreting? The term national security can mean any number of things. It can mean critical defense materials, supply chain resilience, strategic industries, or occasionally, this industry is politically sensitive. The Constitution grants Congress the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations, but modern statutory frameworks allow presidents to act with considerable discretion and latitude, which means tariffs are not just economic levers. They are separation of powers levers. And whenever executive authority expands in the realm of trade, you're not just arguing about steel or semiconductors. You're arguing about constitutional architecture again. And this argument is not a new one. It is just a new chapter in a much more venerable argument about how power flows in a federal system. Chapter 6, the Georgia-built revelation. Now let's address the thing that almost everyone misses in this discussion. The purpose of a tariff is not always to collect money, and it is not always to permanently block imports. Oftentimes, the desired outcome is behavioral change. Imagine that you're a foreign automaker. The United States imposes a not insignificant tariff on imported vehicles. You have the following options: absorb the cost and reduce your profit margin, raise prices and risk losing market share, or move production inside the tariff wall. Option 3 is frequently the entire point. If you want to sell into the American market without paying the tariff, well, you can build your factory here. You can hire American workers. You can source your components domestically. You can produce inside the boundary. And suddenly the tariff disappears because the product is no longer an import. The goal was not punishment. The goal was relocation. That is why your brand new Japanese car might have been assembled in Georgia. It's why foreign steel companies invest in American mills. A tariff is, in part, a sign on the door that reads, if you want to sell here, maybe you might consider living here. Now, does that gambit always work? No, of course it doesn't. Does it always produce efficient outcomes? Again, no, it doesn't. But when it works as intended, it doesn't reduce trade to zero. It changes where trade happens. That is a far subtler distinction than most cable news panels and hyperventilating podcast bros have time for. Chapter 7, Smoot-Hawley, or How to Start a Trade War Without Firing a Shot. Now, no discussion of tariffs escapes the gravitational pull of 1930. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act raised U.S. tariffs on thousands of imported goods during the early stages of the Great Depression. And in popular memory, it has become the economic equivalent of lighting a cigarette at a gasoline refinery. The simplified story goes something like this. Congress raised tariffs, other countries retaliated, global trade collapsed, the Great Depression got worse. There is, to be sure, a kernel of truth in that argument. Other nations did respond with retaliatory tariffs. International trade did contract sharply in the early 1930s, but let's resist the temptation to reduce history to a cartoon. The Depression was already well underway before Smoot-Hawley ever passed. Banking failures, monetary contraction, and structural weaknesses were already doing considerable damage. Smoot-Hawley did not single-handedly cause the Great Depression. What it did do was pour sand into an already seizing gearbox. When global demand is collapsing and you raise barriers to trade, that doesn't create resilience, it creates rigidity. And when everyone retaliates at once, that doesn't have the effect of protecting domestic industry, it just shrinks the pie. This is the cautionary tale. Not that tariffs are evil, but rather tariffs deployed into a collapsing global economy can amplify contraction. Tools, context, timing. Swinging a hammer during an earthquake does indeed have consequences. Chapter 8, the thing everyone pretends won't happen. Tariffs are unilateral. Trade is not. If the United States raises tariffs on another country's exports, that country has political incentives of its own. Domestic producers over there demand protection. Politicians respond. Retaliatory tariffs are not exotic, they are predictable. And retaliation does not have to match product for product. If we tariff steel, another country might tariff soybeans. Now, you're not just arguing about industrial policy, you are reshuffling pain across regions and across industries. One sector gains insulation while another sector gains ulcers. This is why trade policy is never just about economics, it is about coalition management. Every tariff creates beneficiaries, losers, and a lobbying cycle that never ends. Once imposed, Tariffs develop constituencies. Industries that benefit from the protection rarely volunteer for exposure afterward, which means tariffs can be politically sticky even when their original justification has faded. And here is the uncomfortable truth. Trade wars are rarely declared. Rather, they are products of accretion, a measure, then a response, then a countermeasure, until suddenly everyone is holding fewer customers and issuing more press releases. Chapter 9. Could tariffs replace the income tax? Spoiler alert, no. This is the part where nostalgia takes a deep breath and then leaps off the bridge. Once again, it is tempting to say, well, yeah, but we funded the federal government with tariffs for most of our history. Why can't we just do that again? It is a question with a one-word answer: scale. The modern federal government spends trillions of dollars annually. To replace the federal income tax entirely with tariffs, you would need to either astronomically raise tariff rates or massively increase import volume, or you would need to reduce the federal government to 19th century proportions, which wouldn't be a bad thing. Don't get the host wrong. But option 3 would require a political revolution. Options 1 and 2 collide with arithmetic and behavior. Raise tariff rates high enough to replace income tax revenue, and you drastically reduce import volume, which then shrinks the taxable base. If tariffs successfully suppress imports, then revenue falls. If imports remain high enough to fund the government, domestic producers face continued foreign competition, undermining the protective goal, and the math refuses to cooperate because it just doesn't math. Remember the earlier tension. Revenue tariffs and protective tariffs tend to pull in different directions. You can fund a small republic on dock fees alone. You cannot fund a modern welfare regulatory national security superstructure just by levying tariffs on container ships alone, without either crushing consumer prices or crushing trade volume, or doing both. This is not an ideological sentiment. It is a spreadsheet. And spreadsheets, unlike politicians, do not clap for applause lines. The fact of the matter is, today's U.S. central government has more employees than the population of Panama. In 1789, 1 of every 13,000 Americans worked for the federal government. Today, 1 of 85 Americans does. Would it be great if there was a convenient way to pull down that whole rotten edifice and return the central government to being something more modest and more reasonable? Yes, that would be great. But we are here to deal with objective reality, not to eat pie in the sky. Chapter 10, Tariffs are tools, not theology. At this point, the camps are usually dug in and fully entrenched. On the one side, you have the people saying tariffs are patriotic, they defend the homeland. On the other, you've got the people saying tariffs are ignorant, they sabotage prosperity. Both of these positions suffer from the same disease, and it is the disease of absolutism. A tariff is not a moral statement. It is not a loyalty oath. It is not an act of xenophobia, nor is it an act of enlightenment. It is just a policy instrument. Like any instrument, it can be used strategically, used clumsily, used temporarily, used permanently, used as leverage, or used as political theater. Sometimes tariffs successfully nurture emerging industries. Sometimes they entrench inefficient ones. Sometimes they encourage foreign producers to relocate inside of the tariff wall. Sometimes they invite retaliation that harms exporters. Sometimes they raise revenue efficiently. Sometimes they quietly become a consumption tax borne by domestic buyers. The question is never, are tariffs good? The question is, what problem are we trying to solve? And is this the right tool for solving it? If you treat tariffs as sacred doctrine, you stop measuring outcomes. If you treat tariffs as forbidden heresy, you stop examining context. Either way, you've replaced economics with catechism, and policy is a poor place for religion. Epilogue: the Customs House and the Constitution. Tariffs have financed the federal government. They have nearly fractured the union. They have protected industries, and they have provoked retaliation. They have reshaped supply chains. They have been wielded by Congress. They have been delegated to presidents. They have funded a minimalist republic and been sidelined by a modern superstate. And through it all, they have remained what they always were: taxes at the border. Not magic, not treason, not salvation, and not doom. Just a lever. A lever that moves capital. A lever that moves prices. A lever that sometimes moves politics more than markets. If you want fewer tariffs, argue from math. If you want more tariffs, argue from incentives. But if you argue as though they are mystical forces that either punish foreigners or guarantee prosperity, you are not doing economics. You are doing mythology. And mythology, for all of its charms, does not balance a budget. And with that, we now close the book on this week's field guide. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, ever so much for your kind attention. Please see your nearest serving wench for assistance in settling your tavern tab. And I now convey you into the loving custody of my distinguished colleague, your illustrious co-host, the one and only, your friend and mine, Mr. Caucasian Sasquatch.
Tactical nuke incoming!
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Blast Radius. This week, I've found a good movie. I'm going to have to go find the title again. I texted it to him earlier, but we'll get to that. I was walking down the street the other day, and I accidentally slipped, tripped, and fell into some of this. You can believe this shit?
Yeah, I know this one.
Oh, dude, this is one of my favorite jokes.
How much more repression, how big a trade deficit and loss of jobs for the American worker, and how much more dangerous proliferation has to exist before members of this House of Representatives will say, I will not endorse the status quo. As I mentioned, it's about jobs, proliferation, and human rights. And there are those who say we shouldn't link human rights and trade and proliferation and trade. I disagree. But if we just want to take up this issue on the basis of economics alone, indeed, China should not receive most favored nation status for several reasons that I'd like to go into now. I'd like to call the attention of our colleagues to this chart on the status quo that the business community is asking each and every one of us to endorse today. Right now, we have a $34 billion trade deficit with China, the 1995 figure. It will be over $40 billion for 1996. Since the Tiananmen Square massacre, this figure has increased 1,000%, from $3.5 billion then to about $34 billion now. In terms of tariffs, I think it's interesting to note that the average U.S. MFN tariff on Chinese goods coming into the United States is 2%, whereas the average Chinese MFN tariff on U.S. goods going into China is 35%. Is that reciprocal? On export, China only allows certain industries into China of U.S.
Work right. So at this point, it behooves me to point out that if you took this speech and put a Donald Trump voice over it with AI, no one would know.
Yes. And on that same note, there have been a lot of clips of Senator Joe Border Hawk Biden doing the rounds this week. And again, just like you just said, if you replace those Joe Biden words with a Donald Trump voiceover, nobody would question it for even a moment. Because as we know, as anybody who's been paying attention to American politics and government for longer than 15 minutes knows, for 35 years, Joe Biden was one of the biggest border hawks in the United States Senate, not just among the Democrats, but among either party. Being a border hawk was one of the central components of Joe Biden's political brand. And
that is exactly what kept him on freaking brand for the steel workers and the unions and all of that stuff. Without that border hawk mentality, Joe Biden never got elected.
And then, in the ultimate irony of all time, he winds up being the president who throws open the border and lets in God knows how many million illegal aliens.
Yeah, no one has any clue. They keep bandying around numbers, but if you go look into like the methods of people crossing the border, like for instance, we don't even have numbers for the Canadian border. I mean, we do have numbers, but that's retarded. You can literally put on a backpack and have an afternoon walk.
And the numbers from the southern border only consist of the people we encountered. They don't consist of the people who sneaked in that we undetected and we never saw them. Because, and let's just take a moment to consider what the real numbers actually look like when you take that factor into account.
Right. And then beyond just the southern border, yet again, how many rode in on ships? How many showed up as stowaways? How many came in as workers and just didn't leave, right?
Yeah, and on top of that, add millions and millions of overstayed visas, expired visas, revoked visas. It's not just border jumpers we're talking about here. There's many different components in this witch's brew of illegal immigration and people residing unlawfully in the country. It's not just people hopping the fence, not by a long shot.
Yeah, no, I love that. A witch's brew of illegal alienship. It's fucking brilliant, dude. That is great.
Industries into China, and therefore only 2% of U.S. exports are allowed into China. On the other hand, the U.S. allows China to flood our markets with a third of their exports, and that'll probably go over 40%. And it's limitless because we have not placed any restriction. In terms of jobs, this is the biggest and cruelest hoax of all. Not only do we not have market access, not only do they have prohibitive tariffs, not only are let in very specific.
I was hoping we'd get by that.
Sorry, don't mind me.
That came up with the last person I showed this to.
Specifically, but China benefits with at least 10 million jobs from U.S.-China trade. The president, in his statement requesting this special waiver, said that China trade supports 170,000 jobs in the United States, 170,000 jobs, whereas our imports from China support 10 million jobs at least. Fact is that U.S.-China trade is a job loser. And one of the reasons that it is.
So here's my question. Does that woman sound more rational because she's telling the truth? Or does she sound more rational because she's saying it with more conviction than she has today?
She sounds more rational because she's speaking in 1996 and there is a Democrat president running for re-election. So we need to pretend we are more serious about this stuff than we actually are so that our party can remain in power. We have to drift back toward the center so that we can win and then lurch back to the left.
That's ooh, yeah, I like that.
Because first let me just make another point, and that is that our colleagues on the other side of this issue will say the trade with China, exports to China have increased 3 times in the last 10 years. They have, but they fail to mention that imports from China have increased 11 times, thereby leading to this huge trade deficit. The other issue, in addition, if intellectual property is a $2 billion, $3 billion loss, technology transfer is in the hundreds of billions of dollars. If you want to sell to China, your products into China, the Chinese insist that you open a factory there. They misappropriate your technology,
imagine that,
open factories of their own,
right, and
then say to you, now we want to see your plan for export. That's as simply as I can say it briefly. But the fact is, this isn't a...
Okay, so you get the point. I don't have to beat the dead horse anymore, right?
I scarcely recognize her when her eyebrows are actually right above her eyes instead of the middle of her forehead.
She's not over there trying to put her teeth back in constantly. I have sympathy for that.
Doing her crazy grandma hands that she loves to do now.
All right, what beautiful bit of absolute absurdity did you find for me to watch earlier today? Would you like to?
It embarrasses me to admit, but I have been watching a lot of arrest videos this week, and I thought this one was the coup de grace. Because most of these types of videos, they're pretty straightforward. You've got a person acting like an idiot, acting like an entitled, ignorant, bumbling fool. And you're obviously rooting for the cops because, the cops are just trying to get through their workday. And I don't know how they do that job and deal with those types of people without sticking a gun in their mouth at the end of the day. But that's beside the point. This one, I went through a whole series of emotional feelings when I was watching this one because there were points where I was rooting for the 2 tweakers. There were points when I was rooting for the 2 cops, and I'm still not quite sure how I feel about it. But as I mentioned to you yesterday, the moment when they finally acquiesced to showing the cops their ID. They hand the cops their ID in a plastic bag that also contains their drug stash. And that is the greatest thing I've ever seen before. And it was at that moment when I said, these people get their own blast radius segment, and that's all there is to it.
Right. They've got to have it. And so, ladies and gentlemen,
they got to have it.
With no further ado, I give you two of what might be the dumbest tweakers on earth.
We're in Key West, Florida, by the way, just to set the scene, and it's just before 7 o'clock in the morning.
Right. This
isn't the beginning, though. We got to go back to the beginning.
It is. It's just that they do that little hooker clip right at the beginning.
Oh, yeah. You're right. Yeah. I apologize.
Okay. So to caveat everything here, or rather a brief overview, these people are at a park early. It's some point in time before the park technically opens, right? And they have
the park opens at 7, and the cops approach them, and it's 5 minutes to 7.
Okay, so which I think is kind of a shit move, but whatever, dude. Florida tweakers.
I think so too, and that was my first instinct when I started watching the thing.
So, do you reckon the park not being open was a pretextual stop to search these folks for tweaker grease?
Yes, I mean we're on a fairly small island here with a fairly small population, and I expect that these people were probably already known to the cops for engaging in drug activity, but that doesn't really change anything. I mean, if they were accusing them of camping in the park, I don't think that's a valid charge. I don't think they were camping in the park. I think they were just sitting on a blanket in the park. If they were camping, they wouldn't have 5 dogs and 2 bicycles with them, and they would have, more than just a blanket to sit on. That was my first inclination, but maybe my thoughts will change as we continue watching it.
So let's find out.
To a couple who pulled out a gun to threaten people in a restaurant.
I didn't want it to be shown for that reason, because I was afraid that they were going to think that I was trying to do that.
These are times when dumb couples get humbled by cops, starting with this couple, who treated the park as if it were their own private home.
We're going straight.
How are we trespassing, though? There's tons of other people that were just here, too.
City ordinance.
Just because y'all got us instead of them, that's not fair. That's not right.
On October 16th, 2025, police patrol officers discovered a couple by...
All right, so I'm not sure.
On October 16th, 2025, police patrol...
We've got
And
3
the AI
dogs.
voiceover got the date wrong, didn't it?
Yeah. The couple are laying on a blanket. They've got 2 bicycles and 3 dogs, and all 3 dogs.
I think 5 dogs, a whole bunch of dogs.
5 dogs, a whole bunch of dogs, whole dog pack, right? And they're tied up to the same tree over here, right?
Yeah.
This does not look like a campsite to me. Is it possible
Nor
that
to me.
is it possible they slept there last night? Maybe, but I mean,
it is
even
possible,
West to do fast.
and you would think, I mean, at least I would think that if someone is calling the cops and asking for it to be checked out, that they wouldn't have just shown up at 6:50 when the park opens at 7. That they're, like I said, either they were already known to the police and the police wanted to talk to them about other things, or they had slept in the park overnight. But they obviously were not just asleep. They're not covered up by blankets or anything. They're just sitting on a blanket on the ground. So I'm not sure exactly how to feel about that aspect of it.
Yeah. Now there is one thing that you can interpret from this scene. They've been there for at least 20, 30 minutes, right? It takes that long to calm enough dogs down to tie them all to the same tree. I mean, that's got to be a trick to start with. Get your blanket out, park your bikes, do whatever you do before you lay down. I mean, it's not like you pulled up, flopped down on the blanket, and then the cop showed up. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're trying to pin me down on a most likely scenario, I'm thinking they've probably been wandering around the island all night, tweaking out, and they have stopped in the park to rest for a little bit.
Got here a little early or way early.
Yeah.
My question is, have they been there for 2 hours or have they been there for 10 minutes? That's what I'm trying to determine, because if they got there for 10 minutes, that cop really should just fuck off, right? Just
Exactly.
in general.
Yeah.
Unless they have other extenuating
Right.
circumstances to pull them up on. So, like, they already know they have a warrant out of Colorado or Massachusetts or something, you know, and they're just
Yeah,
like,
if
okay,
it's
when you're trespassing, you're in the park, get in the car.
if it's just a couple of normal people minding their own business who got to the park, walking their dogs, get 5 or 10 minutes before the park opens, then yeah, that's an absolute dick move on the part of the cops. If you know, if that's the surface level reality, but
Right.
we're not sure that it is.
Well, regardless of whether they have go fast juice or not. I
Exactly.
mean, because without being an asshole to start with, they never find out about the rest of it.
Well, yeah, and that's a secondary issue anyway. If they had just shown the cops their fucking ID, the worst case scenario would be that they get a ticket and they send them on their way.
Maybe a
But
ticket.
yeah, maybe a ticket if the cop really wants to be a dick. But the chick decides that she wants to stand on principle, as women often do in these types of videos. I shouldn't have to show you my ID, motherfucker.
And while I agree with her, shouldn't and
Yeah,
not going to are two different things.
precisely.
I mean, because technically speaking, in the barest sense of the law, they are trespassing out of hours, right? So at worst, they get they basically, what happens is the worst. But at best, you can hope for is for them to show up and be like, get out of here, kids. Stop being so, go get a job, you know, like cut your hair, get a job.
Either that, or I write you an infraction for loitering and it's a $20 fine or some shit.
Yeah, whatever it is, it's.
Patrol officers discovered a couple violating park hours. The police had no idea that this couple was incredibly unpleasant.
Well, the park is closed. Can I see your guys' IDs? I need your IDs.
We literally just got out here.
Well, the park is closed.
Until 7.
It's not 7 o'clock yet.
And it's like a few minutes till 7.
All right, so I need your IDs because you're in the park after hours.
Okay. We literally just got here, but okay.
But I need your IDs
Other
first.
people walking their
You
dogs
understand?
as
I
well.
need your IDs.
All right, so the ID thing.
Yep.
Technically speaking, because they are trespassing, right? In order to write a formal trespass, assuming that's all that's going to happen, they have to get the IDs to formalize all of that. So
Yeah, because you can't write a citation to man 1 and woman 2. You have to know who you're writing the citation for.
but that being said, hypothetically speaking, what happens if they don't happen to have an ID on them, right? At that point, the second he's like, hey, you're being detained, I need a ID, and you're like, I don't have an ID, he'll be like, full name, date of birth, location of residence, right?
Well, yeah. The thing I'm wondering is, what if this was 7:01 instead of 6:55? Because when the cop makes his approach, they are technically in violation of the city ordinance that says you can't be in a public park before opening time. Opening time is 7 o'clock, and that then gives him the opening, the window to demand identification and potentially write up a ticket or an infraction or whatever. But if it's 7:01, then does he have the right to do that? I don't think he does.
I don't think so. I don't think so. But that's the pretext. Is the fact that you're here out of hours, I can now ID you.
Yep.
And basically it's the classic running for warrants and all that stuff. Or like you said, they already know these people and they probably maybe got a few calls about them. I mean, this is an island. There ain't a whole shitload of people here. It don't take long to get to know everybody.
Yeah, and when we find out later that they say they've been on the island for a couple of months. So they are not locals. They are newcomers. They are obviously involved in drug activity. So I would be shocked if they are not already known to the police, and that's part of the reason why they're being approached.
First.
For what?
For what?
Yes.
So I can give you a warning for being in the park after hours.
There's other people that are here.
Okay, well, I'm talking to you first.
And I'm telling you, we literally.
Are you going to give me your IDs or no?
We have witnesses that we were just here.
7-1 arrival yard.
It was that big of a deal.
Are you going to give me your IDs?
Why? We didn't do anything wrong.
So you're here a few minutes early. What do you think, chat? Dip move or legitimate pretext?
Yeah, I want to know what the chat thinks about this.
5-2, I have 2 refusing to identify.
We're not.
So at that point, she's fixing to do the right thing. She's stating out loud, I'm not refusing to identify, but I am waiting for you to tell me I'm under arrest, right?
Right.
Because
right.
I'll identify under threat of arrest, but I'm not identifying just because you fucking told me to. Now, if I have a bag of speed in my pocket, that equation comes out a little bit different.
But having said that, if you have a bag of speed in your pocket, shouldn't you be all the more eager to just show them your ID and cooperate as obsequiously as you can so that they just don't have any more pretext to search you and find your bag of speed?
Right.
Is all I'm saying.
So unless you know there's a warrant for you out of Georgia and that once they run that ID, they're going to find it and they're going to take you in.
And unless you're keeping your unless you're keeping your ID in the same Ziploc bag that your stash is in, which I guess is a pretty big complicating factor.
Yeah, I could see that being a problem, but I mean, as long as it's not like the only bag she has, as long as that Ziploc bag is inside of another bag that isn't see-through, we might have a shot at this. And
no, it's not. No, we're gonna see him hand it to the cop.
Oh my God.
And then we're going to see the cops go, did these people just give us their stash with their IDs in the same bag?
Well, I do not have IDs in my hand after I ordered you to give them. So.
We don't need an ID.
Okay. Well, you guys are not free to go.
They are now illegally detained.
You need to identify.
Is this motherfucker wearing a goddamn crown? The hell is that?
It's a very strange type of headgear. You totally can't tell. You totally can't tell there are a couple of tweakers. It's a real surprise when we find that out.
I mean, the fact that he's wearing the Bruce Lee starter kit.
Exactly. Exactly.
Or you'll go to jail. I just need you guys to hand over your IDs so I can give you an after hours warning.
We weren't here. We just got here.
You just told us we can't be here, so we're leaving.
Well, I don't know your names. How am I going to document the IDs?
All right. I think she just walked over to get poop bags from the public poop bag dispensary over there.
Possibly. And we just heard him say he's not even gonna give them any sort of infraction or ticket. He just wants to give them a written warning for being in the park during non-business hours, or whatever the correct term is, non-park being open hours. So just show him your fucking driver's license, for Christ's sake, dude.
Because we're coming right back at 7 o'clock. We're going to walk out, and then once it hits 7, we're going to walk back in.
It's literally only 6:55. Park opens up at 7 o'clock.
Are you going to ID yourself or not?
We just got here to the park, and we're having issues already because we set up.
7-1 is called.
Okay. Here's another question for chat. Is she calling her daddy or her lawyer?
You know, that's one of my favorite things about these videos and the women in them, specifically the women. It is just the women, the way they are about they wield their phones like it's some combination of an offensive weapon and a protective talisman. Like the phone is always in their hand and they're always gesturing with the hand that has the phone in it, and they seem to operate in the belief that if I'm looking at my phone and pretending to swipe things and tap things, that means the entire outside world doesn't exist, and I don't have to deal with anything or anybody. And smartphones are an even bigger problem than female psychosis, and I don't say that lightly. Or maybe the one feeds into the other and makes it exponentially worse. But and the freakouts that we see women have in these videos almost always hit peak volume when they are deprived of their phone, or when the cop tries to touch their phone. That is, everything goes nuclear at that point.
Well, I mean, that's where all the evidence of her cheating is. She can't have that out of her control. I mean, we're not dealing with the upper crust of society here. And lately, from what I understand, if we were, it would be a much worse situation going on in the park at 6:55.
And quite often there's some aspect of, well, my uncle's a cop or my dad's a lawyer, so I need to use my phone to contact him, and then he's going to tell him you have to let me go or else you're going to lose your job. There are so many of those examples in these videos. It's just freaking hilarious and so precious that people actually think that because they've got a relative who's a cop in some other state, in some other jurisdiction, God knows where, or a lawyer, not, a real estate lawyer, a copyright lawyer, some random kind of lawyer, that just because you know a person with that job description, it means that you are going to get them on the phone, and that is going to completely absolve you of the crime that you have committed. And the cop is going to say, oh my God, this changes everything. You've got an uncle who's a cop in New Jersey. I apologize. You are free to go. Get out of here.
Contact capacity.
When we have people walking their dogs, there's a guy that walks a little white dog in a white van. There's another guy that walks a little mini shepherd every morning. He knows us, just saw us get here. And we're having issues.
I got to give her credit for one thing. She is getting the fuck home. Like, she's not lollygagging around at all. She's leaving.
Yeah. And it only happens after the cop says you're not free to go. That's when they try to gather up all their shit in GTFO.
Please tell me the reason for that.
Are you guys still refusing to hand over your IDs?
There's no need to. We don't have to.
You just gave us our warning, so we're heading out.
The couple seemed annoyed from the very beginning, but when the officer insisted on checking their IDs, their attitude quickly changed and they began to step away. At first,
so here's an observation. Looking at the fact that they have a small dog pack rolling, they do at least have enough water for at least a few hours, depending on how hot it is and how much activity they get involved in. Right.
Right.
I mean, there's at least a gallon of water there. So that's a good sign that they're at least semi-responsible people.
Yeah. And I from what's in this video, I see no reason to believe that they actually weren't just out bicycling and exercising their dogs early in the morning. Whether they're tweakers or not, I see no reason to disbelieve that.
Right. That, I mean, yeah.
First, it seemed they realized the seriousness, but in reality, the situation was about to escalate.
But I'm going to be honest with you. As a cop, I would probably stop and ID that dude based on his hat. Oh, y'all can't see his hat. Hold up. Y'all can't see his hat. Let's, how do I do this? Let's do this.
And there's another interesting aspect of this whole interaction that at the start of it, for the first few minutes, it looks like they've got, the normal standard type of millennial relationship dynamic where the woman does all the talking and the woman is clearly in charge, and the man is just a handbag holder who stands in the background staring at the floor, not saying anything. But eventually, after they're on their bicycles, we eventually get to the point of the guy saying, "Sweetheart, can't we just show him our fucking IDs and get going?" Because you can tell there's the unspoken subtext of, do we want this guy to find our stash and go to fucking jail? Or how bad do you want to stand on principle here, sweetheart? Can't we just show him our fucking IDs? I mean, come on.
There's another option, and this is the thing that drives me ape shit. You could stare that man straight in the face and say, "I'm sorry, sir, I didn't bring my ID. I wasn't driving anywhere, but I will name my name and comply verbally," which is perfectly freaking legal, right? Yes. And then no bag gets taken out and nobody has to go to jail unless she's got a warrant somewhere.
And I apologize for being in the park off hours, and I assure you it will not happen again.
Oh no, fuck all of that. Just comply just enough to get away with your your speed and your weed. I don't care about the rest of that.
Well, it's just a matter of how bad do you not want to go to jail, ultimately.
Late.
Come on, guys. Come on. Harassing us to no
5-2. They're still refusing to identify. They're walking out towards the parking lot.
You don't have to identify ourselves when we did nothing wrong. There's tons of It's literally 5 minutes to the park's open. You're gonna harass us, we need to harass everyone else that comes out here. And walks their dogs.
Come on.
All right, I'm gonna follow you guys.
So he's already made the verbal statement, and I know a lot of people are gonna like hate me for this. Once he says you're not free to go, the debate on whether or not you're leaving the park is kind of over.
It is over. Yep.
Do what the nice man with the gun says.
And you're not going to gain anything by standing on principle and trying to live in the world that you would like to exist rather than the world that does exist. Well, we shouldn't have to show our IDs because we were doing nothing wrong. Yeah, it would be great if that was the world we lived in, but it's not, sweetheart.
Right. And there is something to be said for you do your fighting in court, not on the side of the road, but also the process is part of the punishment, and there's no escaping the process.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because that is also a common feature in many of these videos where the people who refuse to cooperate and refuse to comply very often do it on the basis of, well, you have to prove that I did the thing or else I won't cooperate. And no, that is not how any of this works. The ticket that the cop is giving you for the speeding or the whatever traffic infraction
Ordering here before.
Yeah, that is just an accusation. The proof happens when you go to court and argue it in front of the judge. And if the state successfully, satisfies the evidentiary burden that you did the thing, then you were guilty of the thing, and the judge imposes but we don't litigate proof on the side of the road, or these people didn't do that, so it doesn't necessarily apply in this instance, but it happens so often in these types of videos that people just don't have the faintest idea, especially the people who think they know all about the law and what their rights are, but they don't have the faintest idea how any of this actually works. There is no burden of proof for a traffic stop. Giving someone a ticket, signing the ticket doesn't mean you're admitting to anything. It just means you're going to come to court and fight the charge or plead guilty to the charge, as the case may be. But you don't get to refuse to comply because the cop isn't proving to your satisfaction that you did the thing. That's not how any of this works remotely.
True. The Fourth Amendment is firmly ensconced in this particular stop. And I don't agree with what the cop's doing. I don't approve of it at all. I think it's a full-on dick move to show up and do this for citationship.
Yep.
They are literally just generating revenue, and I don't think that shit should fly. I think the judge should throw that shit out immediately. But here's where everything goes haywire. When you go to the judge, initially this was going to be a citation, allegedly, right?
Actually, just a warning.
Just a warning, right? Due to not stating her name, date of birth, and yada yada yada, that should have satisfied the requirements, and she wouldn't have had to bring the Fourth Amendment into this at all, right?
Exactly.
He would have had no reason to go any further than that, unless she has charges in some other state or something, or some other county, and she knows that, which might be a reason not to. Because whether or not you got meth in the same bag with your freaking ID or not, they never know that if you just give them the verbal ID. And like you said, you can go fight it in court. Now, I was saying the process was part of the punishment. In the modern court system, a freaking early be an early violation, whatever that is, being there when closed violation is not the kind of thing you get a fucking jury trial with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
and 90% of the time, the judge is just like, fucking pay us, bam, get out. You
And
know,
like you were saying
$30 fine.
before, maybe the most prudent possible play for them was to say, I'm really sorry, but I don't have my ID on me. We were just out taking the dogs for a walk. I didn't grab my wallet, but I am happy to give you my name and date of birth and social security number. You can run me through the database, and that probably would have been enough to satisfy the cop.
I want you to listen to this because it's funny. I get tailed by cops on the way to work. They go 10 to 20 miles an hour over the limit in an area of lots of blind spots. So F them, sir. If they're following you and going 20 over, you are don't confess to crimes on our show. Welcome in, buddy. Good to see you. Thank you for playing.
We love self-incrimination here on the Blast Radius, ladies and gentlemen.
Allegedly. All right. I like John DeNicola. He's been around for freaking ever, and he's got a question, so we're going to entertain this, right? Let me ask you all this. What obligation do I have to speak to police and aid their investigation? Because he's writing a physical warning. It's not just a verbal warning. And technically he has the authority to ID you in order to verify to command that you were giving a verbal warning at least once, so that when you're out here tomorrow at 5 a.m., they can just hook your ass up and take you downtown. Right.
Yeah.
I know
generally
it's
speaking, if I'm not mistaken, I think this is in every state thing where if a peace officer wishes to identify you and ask for your ID, even if you're just minding your own business, going about your day, I think you're obliged to do it. And
obliged to or obligated?
Whichever word you like.
No, because I mean, this is the thing, is that you're not. Right? They have to have probable cause. Now, there's a lot of downstream shit that takes place as if it should be upstream. And the existence of qualified immunity is a huge freaking problem when it comes to accountability. And then you've got the capability of gypsy cops just to hitchhike around the country and never lose their job, just quit before they get charged. There's a massive industrial complex of victimization of the citizenship that is trained into our police force because that's how they generate revenue, right? And that sucks. I hate it. I don't like it. And anywhere I can, I speak out against it. Is this a legitimate stop? Yes, it does appear so. Is this a legitimate IDing? I see a legitimate IDing here myself. Do I like it? No. Do I think it should have happened? If I was the judge, would I kick it out? Probably. But at the same time, there were other options they could have done that didn't involve grabbing their freaking bag. What up,
you want me to read out? You want me to read out the answer the AI just gave me?
Okay, sure. We'll do that.
Whether you are obliged to show ID depends on your location in the U.S. and the specific circumstances of the encounter. Generally, you do not have to provide identification during a consensual encounter, which is defined as a casual conversation where you are free to leave. So there's the determining factor. Once the cop says they are not free to leave, that's when they are obliged to show identification. So I think we've cracked that one.
Well, not necessarily show. You keep saying show identification. That's not the requirement to provide identification. You can do it verbally. I've done it.
It gives further elaboration here. If you are driving in all 50 states, you must show a valid driver's license, vehicle registration, and proof of insurance if pulled over for a traffic violation. Passengers generally do not have to provide ID unless the officer has reasonable suspicion of a crime involving that specific passenger. There's another section called Stop and Identify States. As of 2026, roughly 26 states have stop and identify laws. In these states, if an officer has reasonable suspicion that you are involved in a crime, you are legally required to identify yourself. In most stop and identify states, you only need to state your name, address, and date of birth. You are typically not required to carry or present a physical ID card unless you are driving. States with these laws include Alabama, Arizona, Florida, Illinois, Indiana, Nevada, New York, and Ohio, among others. However, Section 3, states without stop and identify laws. In states like California, Pennsylvania, and Texas, you are generally not required to identify yourself, even if you are being detained, unless you are being formally arrested or are the driver in a traffic stop. Even in these states, refusing to identify yourself during a lawful detention can sometimes lead to an obstruction charge if it interferes with the officer's duties.
Right. And that's why in almost every case where someone refuses to ID, the cop immediately threatens to charge them with obstruction, whether it applies or not, because they don't really know and they don't really care. Right.
Yeah, it's more of a cudgel to try and provoke the desired outcome.
And that's not cool. Like, I don't appreciate that shit at all. Right.
Correct. That is not cool.
Back before I was a YouTuber and I had all this wonderful experience with all of the lawfare that takes place in the universe, I stopped and asked the cop for directions and that motherfucker ID'd me. And I left that interaction highly confused and weirded out because
that's a different.
I mean, he wouldn't say a word to me. And then when he did give me directions, he was like, take a left and go to the end of the road. But he didn't tell me where to go after that. I got to the end of the road and it was like a little 5 points kind of situation. And I was like, fuck. Anyway,
that's the kind of shit that does not promote public trust in law enforcement.
Exactly. And frankly, I don't appreciate it. Wrong button.
Come on, let's go.
Come on.
Let's go.
Alpha 5-2, do you have charges on?
10-4, they have 3 large dogs with them, so I'm going to wait until I have backup.
Come on, let's go.
You did nothing wrong.
Come on, put yours off.
They're both in the park after hours and refusing to identify.
Walk your dogs out there early in the morning that we know. You just always get here early as well.
All right, I'll tell you one more time, you guys need to stop and identify yourselves.
We did nothing wrong. There was no problem.
You're in the park after hours.
I wasn't over for another 2 minutes. He said, okay, we would leave.
You're camping in the park after hours.
There's many witnesses that just saw us. And there are people that come out here with their dogs and walk the loop as well. If you're going to discriminate us, then you need to go against everyone else. There's no reason for it. No reason.
Still
all you have to do is identify yourself.
Why though? We don't have to.
You get a warning.
You guys asked for
I told you multiple times.
There's no reason for it.
We have a lawful investigation that we have to do.
Lawful investigation. There was no investigation.
There is.
There is no reason to hand you our IDs. It is our right and a commitment.
I told you you're in the park after hours, in violation of park rules.
We got our warning. We literally just got here.
You can't get a warning unless it's documented. It's a verbal warning.
It's a verbal warning.
It's a written warning.
He said it was a verbal warning. So.
No, he never said a verbal warning.
No, he never said that.
Official warning.
She's hallucinating things that were not said.
She is tweaking, so there's that.
I did not
there
say
is
that.
We're going straight
How are we
out.
trusting?
And this is Florida.
There's other people that were just
And it is
here
Florida.
too. Just because y'all got us instead of them, that's not fair. That's not right.
What about everyone else is walking here at the same time?
Exactly.
How do you know he didn't talk to anybody else?
Because he just pulled up. I just saw him.
And here's my other question. Why didn't at least one of them ID themselves so they could leave with the dog while the other person had the argument?
That would be another good way to go.
Right? Because, I mean, somebody's got to take the ball.
I mean, knowing that you've got drugs on you and you're liable to go to jail if they are discovered, it's just not the right time to stand on principle, sweetheart. Maybe stand on principle when you're not carrying drugs. What do I know?
Well, I doubt there's a time when she's not carrying drugs.
You raise a fair point. I will give you that.
Literally just saw him.
Oh, no, not the blue gloves. Fuck.
Dum, dum, dum.
Yeah, y'all are going to jail now. The blue gloves are out.
You guys are literally camping.
here every day, bro.
The two insisted they were just following their routine and not breaking any serious rules. The argument grew increasingly tense.
So what? We're not camping. This is our daily.
Okay, so that's one of the points right here. The only thing that actually makes this even approaching an obstruction charge is the fact that they were here out of hours. That fact that everything else that takes place all hinges on the fact that you were here at a time when they can legally issue for you being here. So
yeah, and whether it's by 3 or 4 or 5 minutes or not really makes no difference.
What do what the nice man with the gun says is a really good
yeah.
point.
Sometimes you need to just obey the instructions of the nice man with the gun. As much as we don't like it, sometimes it's the prudent course of action.
You know, and I've never understood it. The way I see it is this: you have a choice. You can go ahead and ID at this point, and maybe you get away with this. Maybe they hand you a piece of paper, you sign it, and you get up, you grab your dogs, and you freaking leave. Maybe, right? That's the best possible outcome you could hope for. The only chance that happens is if you comply. On the other hand, if you decide to die on this hill today, you might actually die on that hill, and B, anything that takes place after the ID refusal is kind of on you, because you are doing illegal shit. You are breaking the law. You know you are. So
exactly.
What are we doing?
And you had every opportunity to resolve the thing and take your warning and go about the rest of your day when there was only one cop there. But now there's 3 cops there, and you're pretty much going to jail now. So I hope the hill was worth dying on.
Right. Time, place, and manner restriction. I mean, I'm not sure. This wasn't a protest for one thing. They were just in the park after hours. Like, if it had been a group of kids, he'd have ID'd them fucks too. You know what I'm saying? Like, but I kind of think that maybe you might have a point there with the whole it being they know of these people somehow. I think they're trying to identify them so that they'll be able to pick them up and deport them off Key West later.
Routine. Y'all are just trying anything.
He's trying to hit us with camping. It's a warning. It's ridiculous that you're escalating at this point. That's what's ridiculous.
That you guys have harassed us this much.
I've never met you. How are you harassed? I've never met you.
You call it the heebie-jeebies, and I'll call it the word. But those dogs were extremely well mannered till that man walked up.
It's funny how that happens.
And I'm gonna say that if I was there with those dogs, now is when I would identify for sure. Because if my dog is triggered on a particular person, I'm gonna take that as a hint.
Yeah,
like maybe,
because as soon as your dogs don't like the next cop that shows up, there's a whole other universe of charges that you're liable to start catching now.
Well, beyond that, just I trust my dogs. And if my dog says that guy needs to be barked at, well, not my current dog because he barks at everything. He's half blind. But, you know, typically I trust dogs over people. And none of those dogs liked that guy. They were cool with both the other officers.
None of them made a sound until that guy showed up.
Right. So now I give them my identifying information.
Not you, though. All the other officers.
All the other officers?
There's only a few nice ones. Hey, it's okay. We literally just got here. We saw 2 other people that we know that come out here earlier than us and walk their dogs. Like, what the hell, guys? We don't do anything wrong. This is what we come out here and do.
We've explained.
We keep an eye on everything else that goes on out here.
All you have to do is identify yourself.
But we don't have to, though.
Yes, you
we
do.
didn't do
It's
anything
a lawful
wrong.
investigation. This is the ordinance.
All right.
And he could probably state that as ordinance for you if you want to get that specific.
Are you guys going to identify yourselves or not? Last
I don't
chance.
have my ID, so.
You want to give me your name?
Sure, maybe. But why? What did we do that was wrong?
All right, get off the bike. Turn around, put your hands behind your back. Now.
No.
Now.
I will give you my ID.
Get off the bike.
I've got my ID.
You just said you don't have it.
Don't have aggressive.
I know, right?
Yeah,
But that's
come
the
on.
thing. That's the part that breaks me on this particular thing. She never had to actually find that fucking card. That's not required. She could have just
Nope.
stated her name, date of birth, whatever other information. And like I said, as soon as that dog went to barking at that one cop that walked up, are you damn right? I mean, sir, I hate to be that guy, but that guy hurts people.
You probably could have gotten away with giving him a fake name and a fake date of birth if all he wanted to give you was a written warning for being in the park after hours.
At the beginning,
Realistically.
yes.
Yeah.
At the beginning. Now they're going to run your entire
yeah.
fucking history.
Oh yeah. Now they're in a whole world of shit.
No reason.
Get off the
Please
bike.
let go of me. Please let go of
Get
me.
off the bike.
I will give you my
Get off the
sock.
bike.
Please
Get off the
let
bike.
go.
Get off the bike.
I will, but will you
Get off
please
the
let
bike.
go?
She talked like she was starring in her own courtroom drama, except there were no facts, just excuses. And her logic was basically, if I'm a few minutes early, it's legal. Ma'am, the only thing you're winning here is a ride in the back of a police cruiser.
Just let go. I didn't do
Get off the
anything.
bike.
I didn't do anything.
Get off the bike.
This is
Put your
not
other hand on your back. Now.
This is not necessary. Would you please stop? This is against the right. Please stop. I didn't do anything wrong. I love you. Please. Please let me go.
I've never met you like this. I'll agree with you.
There's other ones.
He's going too. He's got to be detained.
I'm just irritated.
There's no reason to be irritated. You would have been gone 10 minutes ago if you just identified yourself. You put yourself in this situation. You understand that, right? Your hard-headedness put you in this situation.
It's early in the
God
morning.
gave you 2
I'm
ears and
sorry.
1 mouth for a reason. Shut
I
your mouth and
haven't-
open your ears.
I'm
You would have been gone.
And I'm sorry. It's
Obviously you
early in the
did.
morning.
So
I barely got any sleep.
Do you have anything else on you?
historically speaking, we refer to that as cops planning.
Yeah. And now they've got half of the goddamn Key West Police Department out here dealing with these two freaking
Yeah, right.
tweakers.
How many fucking cops does Key West have? That might be all of them. That's a good point.
Yeah, I know. At 7 o'clock in the morning, it probably is.
Right?
No, I don't. Please don't do this. Huh?
Where are you from?
I'm from Daytona.
How long have you been in Key West?
A couple months. Back and forth.
I think now you probably know, man. Identify yourself as you're asked to identify by a police officer. Doesn't matter how tired you are, how much you've had to eat, how much you've had to sleep. It doesn't matter. It's different here. You're going to learn that. Today, the hard way.
I'm not
Right,
a
so we
bad
have one
person, so
to say.
please don't talk to me like that.
Talk to you the way I want to talk to you, man, because you were asked simply to identify yourself by a uniformed police officer and refused to do
We
so.
have identified
So much
ourselves
to
so
the
many
point
times.
where you have 1, 2, 3, 4.
So about that. That is that is an inappropriate interpretation of the law, sir. It is not required to identify until you have been found doing something wrong. She should identify in this case. He is correct on this point now, but that interpretation, the way he stated it, is the reason why citizens hate cops.
You're not wrong.
Units coming here.
It was
All you had to
necessary.
do was get here. Who decides that? You? Did you go to the police academy? Do you have a law degree?
No, but I
Do you know the policies of the Key West
You know
Police
this?
Department?
Thank you.
Okay. You identify yourself when a police officer asks you. It's really just that simple.
In this case, yes, I think so. Because if she'd identified the second he asked for it, be like, here, like
Yep.
here it is, vocally. I'll tell you.
Yep.
I don't
And they
think
and
it
they
was.
and they would be down the road 10 minutes ago.
Yeah. And could probably legally come back in 15 minutes.
Yep. Absolutely.
Maybe. Although sometimes when you get one of those citations, there's a 24-hour ban with it. I think that's how it's done here in Georgia. If they have to ask you to leave because of any type of violation, there's a 24-hour ban. So if you come like right back, even if it's technically legal, it's not suddenly.
And you're probably asking for trouble if you do that anyway.
I'm not sure I care because they are
Yeah.
on an island. There's a limited amount of freaking territory. And how many places can you get trespassed from in 24 hours?
You know, but I feel like I don't want to get on the bad side of a small town police department
God bless you.
We were literally only 10 minutes early. There's people that could come out here earlier and walk their dogs.
Listen, I wasn't here when all this first started. Okay, like I wasn't here. So listen, what I'm gonna tell you, just like I was just telling him. Do you remember when I spoke to you guys out on the Wall Street and you guys were having the issue where he was needing to go up and take care of his stuff?
Yeah.
When inspecting the bag containing their IDs, the police were
There it
even
is.
more surprised to discover a substance testing positive for methamphetamine. This made the severity of the incident escalate further.
That's what it comes down to. That's what it comes down to.
It's okay, puppies. I love you.
Do you have their IDs?
They're running the female right now. They're sent for confirmation. It's failure to appear on Monroe.
Okay, so camping.
There's a warrant, bench warrant, failure to appear.
Yep.
Park after hours for both. A warrant for him. Does she have a warrant?
That's why he didn't give his ID. Does she have a warrant? No. She could have just been like, oh, I'm so-and-so from such and such, and took the dogs and left with all the drugs, and homeboy had been picked up and extradited to wherever the fuck.
Don't hand him the bag with the IDs and your stash in it. Maybe just reach into the bag, pull out your ID, and hand him that. I ain't no rocket surgeon.
I agree, but I from the Jump Street, I disagree on actually presenting the ID. If I don't have to, I won't necessarily do it. You pull me over in a car, yeah, I'll toss you my license, right? I got no shits to give about that, whatever, right? It's kind of a different situation. The problem here is they weren't on the sidewalk. If they had been on the sidewalk or sitting in that bench right there, it probably would have been fine. The articulable suspicion would have been alleviated, but they were actually in the park. And that's that line. I know it's a paltry fucking 2 steps, but it is the legal line that we're having an issue with right now.
I feel like I was right that this video was fertile ground for discussion.
Oh, absolutely, dude. My other show that I do on Tuesdays is almost all this type of stuff and interrogations and stuff. Karen's going crazy and whatnot.
Yeah.
They got weed and gold.
Oh, great. Hey, we found something in your bag, the bag with your IDs, that tested positive for methamphetamine. So I'm going to ask you some questions about it, but I have to read you the Miranda warning.
All right, check it out. You see her eyeballs?
Yep. Sure do.
Can you tell me that it's not yours without telling me it's not yours?
That's exactly what that is. You nailed it, my friend. Giving the boyfriend the big wide side eye treatment.
Like, bitch, you better take full fucking responsibility on this shit. I got dogs to take care of, you sick fuck.
But you're sweetheart, you're the one that wanted to stand on principle. So, let's not pretend there's not culpability both ways here.
That pretty much trashes that out. I want to go into a good movie, right? I want to bring happiness and joy to the whole fucking universe. Now, you'll be sad when you finish the movie, but it's a damn fine film. It's got Samuel L. Jackson. It's got what's his fucking name? Bill Paxton. It's got everybody in it, dude. It's fucking awesome. And
didn't Bill Paxton die?
This is not a new recent film. This is not a new film.
Got it.
The Last Full Measure. It is about the fight to get to confirm a Medal of Honor to a U.S. enlisted airman one of only 3 ever issued in history, and the story behind it and how it came that he didn't get it in the first place and why he deserved it and what it took to get it for him. And I put this on for it to be noise in the background, and I literally delayed lunch for 2 hours while I watched the movie because I couldn't walk away.
Nice. That's a
Yeah.
pretty lofty recommendation.
The last full measure. So do your thing.
Well, let's all watch that movie and come back and talk about it next week, shall we? Ladies and gentlemen, thanks ever so much for joining us here on the Blast Radius tonight. And we once again congratulate Team USA for defeating Team Canada and making this one of the darkest days in Canadian history, which they'll be talking about for the rest of their natural born lives. We do love that, even if we Americans have better things to think about it and we'll forget about it within the next 36 to 48 hours. That doesn't matter. They're going to be miserable. That is what counts. We will see you next Sunday, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific, as we always do. We hope you have a great tomorrow and an edifying Tuesday and just an absolutely fantastic rest of your week. Thanks again for joining us. We will see you next time. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.
Give me the money. Give me the money, okay?